All right, hello everyone. So today we are going to be talking about the rise of modern environmentalism. Primarily, we're going to be talking about Cesar Chavez and the United Farm Workers Movement, but I think it's significant to also touch on what we were discussing with Rachel Carson. So I called her the mother of modern environmentalism, and the reason why I call her that is because people have been concerned about the environment in the past. People wanted to protect forests. Legislators and environmentalists sought to protect forests, national parks, all sorts of things like that. They wanted to build parks because they thought it was essential for every person to um, have access to green places where they can go and just enjoy nature. Modern environmentalism was primarily focused on how to eliminate pollution and how to protect polluted rivers as well. So, um, one of the things that was happening at this time is, remember, we were focusing on the dangers and damaging effects of pesticides. Well, Americans are starting to realize that pollution could have a similar impact on taking out certain aspects of an ecosystem and throwing off this balance of life and nature. So one of the things that's happening is that environmentalists are beginning to focus on how to eliminate pollution in rivers and water. And one of the reasons, or one of the things that really demonstrated how bad things were getting, is that in Cleveland, Ohio, the Cuyahoga River actually caught on fire because there was so much pollution in that waterway. So think about it. It's wild to imagine that there'd be that much pollution that a river could not support life and that could actually catch on fire as well. So environmentalists are working to protect the environment and to make sure that everyone has space where they can breathe fresh, clean air, and also to make sure that the water is protected, that everyone is drinking. So that's what modern environmentalism is all about. Now we'll go ahead and shift gears to focus on Cesar Chavez. And Cesar Chavez was a very important person, also lived, he's just this really interesting figure because his movement is starting shortly after MLK's civil rights movement. And so we can kind of see how Chavez was this contemporary, how he was someone who was working at the same time, and he was someone who saw how effective civil disobedience was working, and he wanted to use this as well to help protect farm workers as well. So Latino migrant farm laborers were this marginalized, underserved community in America. What marginalized means is that their rights were not protected. They were individuals that would work for very low wages, individuals that would be constantly exposed to chemicals and to pesticides, individuals that experienced just so much trauma in their lives, and their bodies were often so beat up and broken after a year of working in the fields that there are all of these concerns about how are these individuals going to survive. So Chavez decides that he is going to unionize all of the migrant farm workers. He's going to unite everyone, and he is going to fight against the growers and the farmers that are putting them in these harmful conditions. So what Chavez is going to do is he's going to take a note from Mahatma Gandhi as well, and he is going to organize marches, he's going to organize boycotts, he's going to go on strike. So there are often times where he and all of his co-activists would hold signs that would say "Huelga," and then he also was a Catholic individual, and he believed in the power of prayer, and he believed that prayer was powerful when people were fasting. What fasting means is that he would not eat for days at a time. He would only drink water. So there was one time where he went on a 36-day fast, where he wasn't eating at all, he was just drinking water. And so this is something where people saw how committed he was to this movement, to protecting other migrant farm workers. And this inspired people everywhere to join with him to support his boycotts of grapes and lettuce and other agricultural produce that the farm workers would typically pick. And they also inspired Americans all over the United States to think about, should I buy those grapes? Or should I buy that head of lettuce? What are the problems with me doing this? And so Chavez was effective in demonstrating how dangerous eating grapes and lettuce could be, not only because this movement was all about protecting farm workers, but because this produce, these fruits and vegetables, were also covered in insecticides. So to look at the humanitarian crisis of farm labor, I think it's important to look at what the working conditions were like for individuals out in the fields. So these types of tents with cots and sleeping bags and just stuffing people into these small areas was fairly common for a lot of migrant workers. So you can imagine these were unsanitary working conditions. They had unsanitary sleeping arrangements as well, where people were just jammed into these types of tents, or they were jammed into these ramshackle sheds, just trying to fit people into places where they could have the barest type of shelter. But then you also have the type of work that they would need to do when they were cultivating lettuce. So I'm not sure if you know how lettuce grows, but it can be a pretty particular plant that needs to constantly be both weeded, but then also it needed to be thinned so that the iceberg lettuce that we typically see can actually grow correctly. So they needed to constantly be pulling the leaves apart so that the lettuce can grow the right way. And you can see that these workers are just stooping over. Imagine having to spend your entire working day like that. I mean, that just looks painful to imagine being hunched over like that day in and day out. So Chavez was all for trying to unionize so that people could have safer sleeping conditions, so that they could have better conditions for working in the field, trying to make stoop labor illegal. And then he was also trying to end pesticide exposure as well. So this is an article that I think is just really powerful because Chavez started his movement in 1962, and this article also comes out in 1962 and demonstrates what is happening to workers who are out in the field. And so it shows that how often people would die. There were 230,000 farm workers, 83 of them died from occupational causes. Because, I mean, when you think about it, farms are such dangerous places. People could easily be electrocuted. Farm equipment could easily run over people. They're out in the hot sun all day, so exposure or a heat stroke is possible as well. I mean, and also to think about pesticide exposure as well is this major killer that is now claiming the lives of many different individuals. So here, I'll be sure to let you guys go ahead and read this, but this is something where we see all of these different examples of people dying from pesticide exposure. A young sprayer was found dead because he had come into contact with phosphate or with a parathion. So the estimated fatal dose about 9 drops orally and 32 drops dermally. And so, he came into contact, he just touched this poison, and it killed him. About 50 agricultural laborers were picking grapes in the afternoon about the same time. All suffered a sudden acute attack of nausea, vomiting, abdominal cramps, diarrhea, and about half went into shock. And it became the luncheon sandwiches had been left in the field in the hot sun for some time before eating. Unfortunately, no food was available for examination. So something where the field workers do not have a safe place to store their food, and so they very well could get food poisoning from that as well. In the process, he lacerated his finger in the seed separating machine. 10 days later, he died of tetanus. So we're just getting all of these different examples. It's not just pesticides, but it is people who are coming into contact with dangerous farm implements, or people who do not have a safe place to store their food, so it is spoiling in the hot sun. We can see people who are dying from other exposure to different types of chemicals. So we just get a sense of how dangerous this time period is, and the fact that there aren't any regulations for farms, the fact that there isn't this occupational safety organization that is trying to protect farm workers at this time. So that's what Cesar Chavez is working towards. And also, there was this thing called the Bracero program where the United States would invite workers from Mexico to come for harvesting seasons, but they had absolutely no rights as well. And in one tragic incident, 28 Braceros were killed when they were all riding in the back of kind of like a ramshackle bus. Really shouldn't have been carrying that many people, but the driver was trying to beat a train, got over the tracks, but the back of the bus was hit and flipped and killed all the people in the back of the bus. So there was just this significant need for more help, that there's the significant need for more protection, for more legislation to ensure that farm workers can have a safe place to work as well. So this is something to also think about, like what their typical day would look like. The unsanitary conditions, the fact that they are coming into contact with poisons on a daily basis, the fact that cancer is becoming a major, is becoming very prevalent among field workers as well. And many of the field workers are also becoming infertile as a result of coming into contact with these pesticides day in and day out. So I just wanted to read this for you, which is a testimony of what the field conditions were like. In the tomatoes this year, we left the house at 4:30 a.m. and got back home about 7 or 7:30 p.m. So think about that. They are working for 15 hours straight from 4:30 until 7. There were no sanitary facilities, so no restrooms. Think about that. Working someplace for 15 hours and you can't go and use the restroom, what would you have to do? I mean, that's one of those things where people realize, where customers who go to grocery stores would realize that the lettuce or grapes that they're buying very well could have human waste on them. That people just needed to pee out in the fields or defecate out in the fields. So it just gives you the sense of how gross and disgusting these fruit and vegetables would be if there weren't any protection, or if there wasn't any legislation, or if there wasn't any sanitary facilities for people to go to. We had to go in the fields. There was one water can for 3 or 4 busloads of pickers. The water was warm, no ice. We all drank from the same cup. So once again, sanitary conditions. They're all forced to drink from the same cup. And many hobos and winos from Skid Row, along with family people and teenagers. In the con this year, we left the house at 4 a.m. and got back around 7. There were no sanitary facilities at all. We would just find any place we could where people wouldn't see us. So this is just really emphasizing what is going on, and the fact that they are spreading this message that farm workers need help, and that's actually a public safety announcement as well. This is for the good of everyone else, for all customers that want to buy fruit and vegetables for their family members. That you don't want to have to worry that the lettuce that you're picking has human urine on it, or that the grapes you're eating has come into contact with someone who might have some sort of disease. So this is becoming a major human rights issue that is also spreading to other Americans, because they're thinking about, how dangerous is this stuff? And the fact that they want to help out the farm workers, but they also want to protect their own families. So here we see Chavez. Like I said, he's leading a massive march. One of the places where he primarily worked was Delano, California, which is in the Central Valley. And this is actually one of the most valuable pieces of land in North America, because it's perfect growing season year-round. It has plenty of water, plenty of space, just a very fertile landscape. So Central Valley is going to be an important place for the UFW to work. And this is a picture of Chavez. Like I said, he was a Catholic man who believed in the power of prayer and fasting, and this is what he looked like after one of his fasts. Just almost doubled over, needing assistance, really could not stand. And so he was able to attract a lot of people to his cause through his example. So like I said, when we think about this as an issue of human rights, it's also about peacefulness and how they are spreading the message. So I like this slide because it shows us 2 different posters that would have been all around America. So when people would go to grocery stores, there would be protesters who were encouraging people to boycott certain grapes or lettuce. and they would see the black eagle of the UFW, Viva la Huelga, so long live the strike. And then also, I like this one where it says, don't eat the grapes. And as you can see, this cluster of grapes looks like a skull. And the reason why they're doing this is because it's reminding folks that these grapes very well could be covered with pesticides, that these grapes could be dangerous. These grapes could have human waste on them. Don't eat these grapes because you very well could hurt yourself or your children if you do so. So this is like this two-pronged attack from the UFW, where it is showing that, boycott the grapes because you want to help people, you want to help workers. This is a humanitarian crisis. But then also, don't eat the grapes because you want to protect your families. So this is how the UFW operated, and why it was so effective is that it was able to spread its message widely, and became a really easy way for customers and Americans to support the UFW. When people tell you not to buy grapes, and that you're helping people when you don't do something, that's a lot easier than telling people to give them money or to go out and actively protest. By supporting a boycott, it becomes very easy to actually support this issue, or to support a farm worker, or to support a farm movement as well. And so that's what we're seeing, is that by not buying something, they're able to make a big difference as well and help a lot of people out. So this is something that I want us to just take a look at and consider, is how Chavez, Rachel Carson, and Martin Luther King Jr. all worked to help create change in society. The 1960s, this was a significant time period in history where people were fighting for the rights of marginalized groups, where they were fighting for the rights of African Americans, farm workers, and also people were fighting to protect the environment as well. And so there's this tidal wave of change that's coming through, and these individuals are creating these massive movements that are gaining the attention of politicians and significant individuals all throughout America. So they're uniting supporters to their cause. And the federal government responded to civil rights activists, environmentalists, and farm workers by passing legislation that really protected their rights. So we'll go into this when we meet next time, but I just want to make sure you guys had a chance to see this lecture, hear it from me. And so I'm going to go ahead and upload this to YouTube, and you guys can go ahead and watch it at your own convenience. So have a great rest of your day, and I will see you guys soon.